So I don't think that he did do that. I do think he was a historical figure, and I do think he changed the world. There's an atheist historian named Tom Holland, not the Tom Holland from the Marvel movies, but that Tom Holland says that, because of Christianity, we're a completely different planet. Not just the Western cultures, but some of the language we use. The idea of the common man having some sort of a power over the elite, that was uniquely Christian. So I do think he was a person, and I do agree that he changed the world, but I just don't think that he rose from the dead.
Maybe sometime in the future we could have a conversation about the evidence for the resurrection.
Yes,
that'd be fun. Let's see here. I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah. Okay. So go ahead, Casey.
I can't remember which one, but you guys were speaking of like the surgeon standing over the child.
Right.
I'm not a huge Old Testament scholar, so I'm diving into Deuteronomy. One of the things that stood out to me is where they said, "Then you shall investigate, search out, inquire thoroughly, and if it's true and the matter is certain, that is the abomination has been committed among you." So that sounds a lot more like justice and the applying of justice as a person of justice.
Right.
That's what you would do as a Marine or currently where you are studying radicalization. You would say, "Hey, Casey, somebody said Casey's a radical. And I'm not going to say, oh, Casey's a radical, we're storming his house, we're killing him because somebody said Casey's a radical," right? You're going to investigate, you're going to look, you're going to be certain, you're going to look at the evidence of my life and
right.
things that happen, make sure I'm a radical.
Right.
And then you will carve me out of society, so to speak, right?
Right.
And that was kind of like came together. The surgeon, when you guys are talking about the surgeon part, it sounds a lot like God is talking maybe about a cancer among his people, right? There's
right.
a cancer among people, and therefore I must carve it out so that the rest of my people do not perish. Because if you're God and you're like, this is the only one and true way, any other way is going to lead you to death and sadness, all these things. Should I carve that out to save the rest of my people? Like a surgeon would carve out a cancer.
Right.
You kind of gave me that idea. So
right.
How would you refute that?
Right, and I don't know if refuting it is my intent, because I do understand that. I just think that when you use that analogy, it's hard to apply that to infants. I can see about a person who continues to do it. That makes sense, but for the infant, that's where it bothers me. I do want to say, your name is Casey, right?
Yeah.
I just want to say that, growing up in the Southern Baptist world, when it came time to move chairs, I wanted to be the guy who carried the most chairs. He beat the heck out of me.
That was impressive.
He won the chair carrying contest, so I concede to you on that.
Well, would it be all right with everyone if we go just do a couple more questions? We usually try to end around 11:15, but we'll take a couple more questions, and then after that, I'll close us, and then we can always, maybe for another 20 minutes or something, we can always talk to people individually.
Can hang out.
But
I know the guy in the corner here.
Yeah, I think you've had your hand up for quite a while.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this isn't.
Sorry.
A clarification for me. I see that God's killed children many times. When the flood came, there was children
right.
killed. In the end, there's going to be sinners who go to hell. So God makes these decisions. But I believe that what God does is He has a plan of salvation, and in this plan, just like the cancer being cut, I think in the plan God needs to do what's best to make His plan work out in the end. And I think some of these things were lessons to us, some of these things were guides for us, and that some children died is a part of it. But another thing is, in Matthew, you can read Jesus saying, you're going to be persecuted, horrible things are going to happen to you, but not a hair on your head will perish, is what he says a few verses later. So there's some perspective here that we need to understand, and that's that our goal isn't today on this earth, our goal is the next age. Right. And that's God's goal for us too.
Yeah.
Real quick, to repeat his question, he was saying that sometimes God, like you were saying before, God can take a life, and through natural events, and it happens today, kids die through natural events. I guess if there was a God and He said, hey, look, there's some really unfortunate things that has to happen to kids, I got it. I'm not going to ask you to do it with a sword. Then it would still be terrifying for me, but it would make sense in given this moral realm concept that we were starting with.
Can I offer a few? So one thing I wanted to say is, one thing that I like about kind of the direction that you're going, one thing I've tried to emphasize throughout is, I've been raising issues related to being humble about what happened.
Right.
Because I think there are these language issues that we may not fully be understanding the Hebrew text. When we talk to Old Testament scholars, a lot of them say, I don't think non-combatants were even involved. Well, it seems to say that there were, well, if they're common phrases that were used at the time, we might be misunderstanding.
Right.
Now, there are times in the past where people didn't have access to the kind of scholarship, ancient Near Eastern scholarship that we have today.
Or the Bible.
But you know
For
what they
hundreds of
did?
years, they didn't have the Bible.
They had trust-seeking understanding. They said, yeah, but I have all this other evidence that God is real and that this is a message from him. So these parts that don't make sense to me, I'm going to say, God is above me. It doesn't make sense to me, but I have other good reasons to believe it's true. Right. So I'm going to say, I don't understand it, but there must be more going on than in my mind, I'm able to understand.
I can respect that because I do that with atheism. So
Okay.
there's things I don't understand, but I trust in it. So I concede that.
So I guess I wanted to throw that out there, that's what I've been trying to advocate for, is sort of I think that even before you study all this stuff here, I have my cultural background study Bible. By the way, this is a very helpful thing to have. But we have I have some great books on this stuff up here. Before you even get into that, you can always say, yeah, but there's really good reason to believe this is true, even if I don't understand all this stuff, so I can trust. But then I encourage you to then go deeper and study this stuff. I could be wrong. I'm open to that. I could totally be wrong. So I keep studying because I want to see. Maybe Richard's point is a good point, and I want to be open to that.
I saw three people who were kind of passionate for questions.
Yeah.
One, two, and then there's a guy in the back.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. You've had your hand up for a while. Sorry. Go ahead.
Real quick, two things, Richard. Thank you for two things. The first thing is you're here.
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't
Amen.
know that I would have the courage to go into a room full of...
I want to say I've been here for a year.
Yeah, that's true.
I've been going to this church and been part of Bible study for a year now. But
Nevertheless, thank you for that,
Yeah.
and I think that's a good example. The
Yeah.
second thing that I wanted to thank you for was the acknowledgement and admission of your bias.
right.
And we as believers in this room would do well to also often acknowledge our position of bias.
True.
So that's me. This is what I'm doing. I've been raised here. My mind has been molded by the church since an early age.
Right.
But one of my favorite things about the discussion that you and James had today came up multiple times. It was, is this text from God, God inspired, however you want to say it. It was canonized by men, but it came from God. That's what most of us in this room probably believe. Mm-hmm. Or were at least parts of it written by somebody who's just having a bad day. You mentioned the Babylonian captivity, reflecting on we don't ever want this to happen again.
Right.
So I guess my question is maybe more of a request for a future session between you two.
Oh, that would be great.
There's a trade-off. Because on one hand, if I believe the Bible is absolutely God-inspired, every single verse, then I have to deal with these. And maybe we can explain some of them away with rhetorical devices.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff in there that's going to cause us problems.
Yeah.
So on one hand, if it's absolutely divinely inspired, I've got to explain away every single one of these instances if I want that view. On the other hand, it's very convenient to say, this was a guy having a bad day. But then I have to deal with the Bible's not absolutely God-breathed.
Right.
So
It's a struggle.
Those trade-offs, I would love to see that in a future session.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for.
I think no matter what you believe, you're going to have a struggle.
Yeah.
Right. And atheism or whatever, you're going to have a struggle.
That reminds me, one thing I did want to bring up is that even if we do say, like Greg Boyd said, maybe some of these Old Testament passages are just someone who's influenced by his culture, his time, and had a bad day or whatever. Is interesting. You'd mentioned, he talked about Jesus kind of replacing the warrior god, and he's not smiting. He's not a warrior god. That's not the New Testament, though. Okay. The New Testament is Jesus as a warrior god and is smiting, because just look at Revelation. Revelation, he comes with a sword, and he comes on a horse. The symbolism of being on a horse like that is a king riding into battle. And the judgment is not only all the people on earth at that time, but the judgment is, it says in the white throne judgment, he's going to judge over all humans that have ever existed. So we're not talking about 10 billion, we're talking about many, many billions. Population growth. But anyway, more than 10 billion. So we're we're talking about a huge judgment that Jesus is even bigger than the Old Testament judgments. So anyway.
I was going to say at our church sometimes we would say white-haired Jesus, because in the book of Revelation they say he has white hair, and so it's almost sometimes like he's pitched like two different people. And I don't think that's theologically what they're saying, but it is a much different kind of mindset, it seems like, with white-haired Jesus.
Although during his ministry, but anyway. Go ahead.
I have a question for Richard. My question is, if everything that happened is an accident, so what makes you think like the past is going to be like the future? Like guarantee you have like the past is going to be like the future? Let's say, what makes you think that you wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden you're floating in the air and you stop working?
Right. Right. That's a good question. So his question is like, okay, so you think everything's an accident? Well, how do you know that tomorrow is going to be the same as today? Maybe the moon and the sun will switch places, or maybe we'd all be floating in the air. And again, that's where my faith, where I say I'm the faithiest atheist. I've tried to be very pragmatic, because there was times in my life where I was really struggling, and I was trying to think what's true. I don't know what's true, and there got to be a point where I said, I know for a fact that I've got to get these things done today. And it became a lot more easy when I had a wife and kids. I'm like, these things have to happen. So you can, philosophize and think about all this all you want, but take care of these things that absolutely have to happen. So between my wife and my boss kind of saying, shut up and get this done, that helped me develop sort of a pragmatic approach to life, so that I still have these questions, but I just try to also make sure I get to the day, so that it doesn't stop me from getting to the day. I do think natural selection-wise, if natural selection is true, and if evolution is true, then natural selection doesn't care what you believe, it just watches what you do. And if you do the things that keep you and your family alive, and if the community does the things to keep the community alive, then you're more likely to be here. So in that case, I don't think that natural selection cares what you think. And not that natural selection is a person or an agency, but people often talk about it like it is. In that case, I don't know that whether religions might be helpful. If they bring people together and they help them be more productive, then evolution might say this is great. In fact, most of the world are some kind of theists. They believe in some kind of theism. So that might be why it endures.
Well, I'm tempted to call on more, but
the one guy in the back, because he.
Oh, someone had their hand up for a long time.
Yeah.
Okay, we can take one more.
All right.
We got to stop after that.
Go ahead.
So one of the points that I noticed you were making quite a bit was the difference between divine appointment of, say, like lightning versus like humanity.
Right.
And I think one of the things that's important to point out is that this is, first of all, the Old Testament we're looking at, and so this was a very specific divine appointment of the Israelites to accomplish God's work and also show how sinful humanity can be, in that we're not able to follow any of God's commandments to the letter, right? So that divine appointment of the Israelites was, it's very important to look at the context of that. And I can see where you're coming in terms of, okay, well, if this might set the precedent for us to go out and maybe like wage, well, like the Crusades, right? But I think there is, well, there can be a slight difference between divine appointment of lightning striking down Adolf Hitler versus, I don't know, me going back in time and striking him down. There's still ways that God can use humanity for that good. And there is our own morality that gets in the way of saying, okay, well, lightning is obligated to follow God, right? But it's not obligated to follow, like, okay, thou shalt not kill, which I looked it up. The Hebrew actually is like, thou shalt not murder and stuff, which is, I'm glad James brought that up, which is really good. But I think that distinction is important of divine appointments, especially within the context of like the Old Testament. And then I had one other small thing about that. What was it? I had a lot of notes.
We could talk after this.
Yeah.
And I know like you've had your hand up, so you and I could talk after this. If
My question is, how do you handle abortion?
Well,
this is off topic, but he asked how I handle abortion. This is a good point. A lot of atheists will jump on the left, and I've heard some atheists say some horrible things when it gets into their, talking about it's not anything, it's just goo or whatever. I've heard some horrible things on the left about, or at least I say the left. people from the pro-choice side, I've heard them say, I mean, scientifically speaking, it's a life as soon as you have, inception. That's all the programming is there. That's going to be one day a healthy adult. I think it's difficult to come up with a set of rules that's going to say this is absolutely what we have to do. And I think that as a guy, I can't appreciate what it's like to have a life growing inside of me. That's not to say I don't have a voice. I can just say this is agonizing. And I've actually, I'm in my 50s. I've known several women that's had to go through this. Whether they had the baby or not, they all said the same word. They said it's agonizing. It's agonizing to have to decide over the life inside of them versus their own life at the time. And I've heard stories of mothers who had to make this choice, and they already had kids, and the new kid would have caused grief. And I've heard of great stories where people changed their mind and everything turned out to be great. I just think it's difficult to come up with a set of rules that says this is always going to apply, and I think that there's an opportunity to become even more monstrous if we say you absolutely can't do this. So I think it's an agonizing choice, but I do agree that scientifically you're talking about a life right there at the first moment.
I'm going to hold back from responding to because there's just no place to stop if we.
Right.
So
it's a good point.
And we do have I saw that we had other hands. We'll have to. You can come up and talk to us. We'll stick around for about 20 minutes afterward. And thank you guys for coming. Let's thank Richard again for coming.
Thank you.
And. If you want to get if you want to know about the September event, especially a reminder as we get close, go ahead and sign up for the newsletter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. No classes.
Yeah.